when I dialed my son to ask what date I should circle for his wedding so I could hem my dress and bake their favorite lemon pound cake, my new daughter-in-law was already on speaker. She glanced at me across my own living room, allowed herself a tiny, victorious smile and said, "Oh, we already married yesterday. We only invited special people." Special people. The words hit like ice water down the back, shocking and mean. The lavender dress I'd picked soft as breath and practical for dancing hung useless in my closet. The bone-colored shoes I'd splurged on sat in their box like two small coffins. I'd pressed $100 bill into an envelope for their wedding gift and tucked it beneath a little card I'd hand-lettered. I'd phoned my sister in Chicago just last week. I'd promised to send pictures. Now there would be no pictures with me in them. Owen looked at the floor as though the truth might be hiding there. Mara swanned deeper into the couch. I bought them on layaway seafoam green, tufted, elegant, and crossed her ankles. The ring glittering on her hand caught my eye, and God help me, my mind registered the size of the stone before I could stop it. I felt foolish for noticing. I felt foolish for 100 tiny things. The way I'd saved grocery coupons to send them $20 extra, the way I kept a spare key in a ceramic sparrow on the porch, just in case, the way I told myself motherhood was a ladder you keep climbing even when there's no rung left. If you're still listening, I need you with me. Tap like so I know you're here, follow and subscribe if you want to hear how this ends, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far this little mountain story travels. Stay through to the end. I promise you, there's a reckoning. I set the phone down as gently as if it were something breakable, though the one that felt breakable in that room was me. The Asheville light came slanting through the lace curtains in my bungalow, catching dust motes and the edges of my disappointment. Outside, someone's wind chimes fussed in the winter breeze. Inside, the clock over the mantel, Robert's clock, the one my husband wound with his careful hands until the day he didn't tick the same as yesterday. The world has a way of pretending. Nothing has changed when everything has. "I thought you wanted small," Owen said, voice thin. "You hate crowds, Mom." "Sweetheart," I answered, and could hear how flat it sounded. "I don't hate family." Mara's smile didn't reach her eyes. It was intimate, just us and the witnesses. My phone vibrated on the table. I didn't need to look to know what it would show. Mara's mother posts everything with glitter fonts. I saw the photos later. Mara, in a white slip dress under a courthouse skylight, her parents toasting with cheap champagne, her brother filming, friends throwing birdseed. In the center of one photograph, Owen's face is soft and boyish, the way it was when he was 9, and begged for one more story before bed. I stared so hard at that picture my eyes watered, and I still couldn't find myself in it anywhere. For 3 years I paid their rent $500 a month, rain or shine. I bought the couch with the mint buttons, the oak dining table, the cream rug that stains if you breathe wrong. When the fridge went out, I drove a cooler across town with meatloaf and milk. When Mara's hands ached, I covered the ergonomic stool for her salon. When Owen's camera needed a new lens to land a career-changing gig, I charged it to my card and told him he could pay me back when the invoices landed. They never did. "I'll make coffee," I said to no one in particular, because it was a sentence long enough to keep me from screaming. In the kitchen, the kettle's shriek sounded like me. I took 2 mugs down out of habit and set them back again because habit wasn't invited to this new life. My hands shook pouring the water. I forced myself to slow. I have been a school librarian, a wife who knows grief by name, a mother who can stretch leftover soup 3 nights and still somehow offer seconds. I know how to collect myself. I did it then. I do it now as I tell you this. When we were alone, Owen followed, hovering like he used to when he wanted another cookie. "Mom," he said, "don't make this a big thing. You were 9, and cried over a broken kite," I thought. "I made that a small thing for you, so you could still fly." I sipped coffee instead of saying it. The mug was warm against my palms, An anchor. "Rent's due next week," he said, eyes darting everywhere but my face. "Just, a reminder." "Ah," I said, and a laugh escaped me. An odd little sound, too bright. There in the doorframe, something inside me that had been patient for too long stood up and stretched. I didn't recognize it yet. I would. Soon enough. "Greta?" Mara called from the living room, voice suddenly sweet, the kind she uses on clients who tip big. "If it was up to me, you'd have been there. It's just, my dad really wanted it small." She picked invisible lint from her sweater. "We'll do a family dinner, okay? Something special." "Only special people," I said, tasting the words as if they were poisonous berries. "I'll keep that in mind." They left with a perfumed hug I did not return. The door clicked, the deadbolt slid, and I stood very still in the quiet until my legs remembered how to move. The house is not grand. It's a tidy Montfort Avenue bungalow with a porch that sags and a rosebush that refuses to die. But that day it felt like a cathedral where I might finally confess the most embarrassing truth. Somewhere along the way, I confused love with paying the bill. I took out a legal pad and a pen that writes smoothly even when your hand shakes. The top of the page trembled with the first line, rent. $500 x 36 equals. And I stopped. Not yet, I told myself. Not while I'm hot. Grief and math make a dangerous combination. You can talk yourself into mercy where there ought to be justice, or punishment where there ought to be a boundary. I made tea. I carried it to the rocker by the window and watched the street until the steam died. Across the way, Mrs. Connolly tossed seed for the cardinals. Her red scarf matched their wings. She waved. I tried to wave back, but my arm was lead. Robert used to say, "When a thing feels too heavy to lift, sweetheart, you don't lift the whole thing. You lift a corner." So I lifted the corner I could. I walked to my closet, unzipped the lavender dress, and laid it on the bed. I slid the shoes from their box. I ran my fingers over the silk ribbon and the careful stitches. "You are not a foolish purchase," I said to the empty room. "You are proof I meant to show up." The phone rang at 8:03 that evening. I knew before I picked up it wouldn't be an apology. It wasn't. "Rent is due," Mara said, breathy with urgency. "Our landlord's a monster. He says he'll evict us if we don't pay by Friday. You forgot to send it." For years, those words would have launched me into motion. Find my purse, call the bank, transfer funds, feel noble and needed and sick afterward. Habit reached for the purse even then. The other thing knew. Bright caught my wrist and held on. "Didn't I warn you," I said very softly, "that I only help special people?" Silence. Delicious and terrible. Somewhere in that silence, something in me stitched itself shut. "Greta, be serious," she snapped. "We're family." "We are," I answered. "And yet here I am, not in your wedding photos." The line went dead. I set the phone face down and let the quiet settle again. The old house creaked. The refrigerator motor clacked on. The clock ticked. I could hear my own breath, and it was steady. Years of giving had worn a rut in me the size of a ravine. I saw the shape of it from above for the first time. It wasn't generosity anymore. It was a habit I'd mistaken for love, and they'd mistaken for entitlement. I turned on the lamp at the dining table and pulled the legal pad toward me. This time, the pen didn't shake. Rent. $500 x 36 equals $18,000. Groceries and emergencies. Estimate $250 x 36 equals $9,000. Furniture. Couch $1,000, $200. Rug $300. Table $600. Camera lens $1.1. Utility deposits, AC repair, tires, bridge loan. Here I paused, counting in the margins, rounding down because I am generous even in arithmetic. $3,000. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. I wrote the total and circled it. The ink bled where my tears hit the page, but I wasn't weeping for them. I was mourning the version of me who believed the next check would buy my place at the table. I closed the pad. I put the pen away. I rinsed the mug and left it upside down on the rack to dry, the way Robert always did. Then I went to bed and slept like people say you sleep after confession, emptied out, aching, honest. In the morning, Asheville was blue and cold. The mountains were the color of old denim, and the air outside my stoop had the fresh, clean smell that only comes after you decide something you can't undecide. I buttoned my coat, tucked the legal pad into my bag, and headed downtown to Crescent Bank. The automatic doors at Crescent Bank whooshed open as if they'd been waiting just for me. I'd walked through them dozens of times before, always with my head down, always to withdraw or transfer money that wasn't mine to keep. But that morning, the glass gleamed differently, as if it knew I was here for something else. Mr. Rakesh Patel, the branch manager with kind eyes and an accent that wraps each syllable like a gift, looked up from his desk and smiled. "Mrs. Lang, always on time. Do you need to make your usual transfer?" The word usual stung, because it was true. My routine had become so predictable even strangers could chart it on a calendar. I sat down opposite him, opened my bag, and laid the legal pad on his desk. The numbers glared back at me, circled like wounds. "No, Mr. Patel," I said, and surprised myself with how steady my voice was. "Today I need to cancel all of them. Every automatic transfer to my son and his wife." His eyebrows rose. "All of them? You've been helping them for 3 years?" "3 years and change," I answered. My throat tightened, but I pressed forward. "I'd like all access blocked. I don't want anyone but me touching my money ever again. Not Owen, not Mara. No joint anything, no extra keys." He studied me a moment, as if to be sure I wasn't acting in haste. "Are you certain?" "Mr. Patel," I said, leaning closer, "I have never been more certain of anything." He nodded slowly, then pulled up my account. His fingers moved with brisk efficiency. With each click of his keyboard, I felt lighter, as though he were sawing through invisible ropes that had bound me to a chair. "Done," he said at last, sliding a stack of papers toward me. "You're free." The words rang through me. Free. My phone buzzed on the desk, Owen's name flashing across the screen, then Mara's, then unknown. Mr. Patel's gaze flicked toward it. "Do you want to answer?" I pressed the button until the screen went black. Number not today. As I left the bank, the winter sun broke through a bank of clouds, spilling light across the sidewalk. For once, it felt like it belonged to me. I walked without urgency, past the boutique I always avoided, past the cafe where Robert and I used to split pecan pie on Saturdays. I stopped at a florist stand I'd passed 100 times and bought a bouquet of sunflowers. When the vendor wrapped them in brown paper, I pressed the bills into her hand and thought, my money, my choice. Back home, I slid the flowers into a glass pitcher. The yellow heads turned toward the kitchen window, unapologetic in their brightness. They were greedy for light, and I realized greed is not always ugly. Sometimes it's survival. By afternoon, the phone rang so often the sound became absurd. I turned it off and let silence fill the house. I took the lavender dress from the bed and hung it back in the closet, not as a symbol of shame anymore, but as evidence. I had once believed I would be included. Now I believed in something else entirely. That evening, I fixed myself salmon and roasted potatoes. I poured 1 glass of wine. I sat at the oak table Mara once complained was too country. The chair across from me was empty, but instead of sorrow, I felt relief. I chewed slowly, savoring each bite. For the first time in years, dinner was mine alone. Not a pit stop before rushing off to solve someone else's crisis. The clock ticked in the living room, steady as a heartbeat. Outside, Asheville's street lamps hummed. I leaned back, folded my hands, and let the words echo in my chest. You're free. The next morning, I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the pitcher of sunflowers, keeping me company. Their yellow faces caught the first rays of light and seemed almost smug, as if they knew I had done something radical. By 8 o'clock, I heard the crunch of tires in the driveway. When I peeked through the lace curtain, I saw Owen's car. Behind it, Mara's, and behind that, a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. My stomach clenched. 3 cars at once was never good news. I braced myself and opened the door before they could knock. Inside my living room, Owen slumped on the sofa, his elbows on his knees. Mara paced like a cat too long locked indoors, her arms folded, her eyes darting. A man in a gray suit stood by my dining table, leafing through a neat stack of my personal papers. My papers. What is going on here? I asked, my voice carrying sharper than I intended. All 3 turned as if I were the intruder in my own home. Mara was the first to speak, her tone syrupy and desperate all at once. Greta, thank God you're here. We've been worried sick. This is Mr. Harlan, from a family law office. He's here to help with your situation. My situation? I repeated, stepping forward. I wasn't aware I had one. Owen finally looked up, his face tight, his eyes red-rimmed but not from tears. Mom, he said, we went to the bank. They told us you canceled the transfers, and Mr. Patel said you blocked us from your accounts. Why would you do that without telling us? I crossed to the dining table, plucked my papers from the lawyer's hands, and stacked them under my arm. Because they're mine, I said coldly, and you have no right to be rifling through them. Mr. Harlan stepped forward, hand outstretched in a politician's practiced way. Mrs. Lang, I'm simply here to evaluate your capacity. Your son and daughter-in-law are concerned about recent changes in your behavior. Abrupt financial decisions, cutting off communication, installing unnecessary security systems. These can be signs of cognitive decline. The phrase, cognitive decline, landed like an insult. My pulse thudded in my temples. I am not declining, I said, steady but firm. I am deciding. There's a difference. Mom, Owen said, standing now, his voice slipping into that patronizing tone I hated, the one he used when trying to make me small. We're worried about you. You've been under stress. Maybe you're confused. The word confused snapped something in me. No, I said, rising to my full height. I am clearer than I've been in years. And you are all going to leave my house. Right now. Mara reached for my hand with feigned tenderness, her eyes glistening like a stage actress's. Greta, please, we're your family. Everything you have will be ours one day anyway. We're just trying to help. Why not make it easier for everyone? There it was, the naked truth beneath all their excuses. To them, I was already a ghost, my money already inherited. They weren't here for me. They were here for what would one day be mine no longer. I pointed at the door, my hand shaking not with fear but with fury. Out, all of you, out of my house. Owen's face hardened. A boy denied his toy. Mom, we can't just walk away. You have obligations. The rent, the car, the cards you co-signed. You can't cut us off overnight. Who says I can't? My voice rose, years of swallowed silence finally clawing out. For years I paid bills that weren't mine, bought food I never ate, financed comforts I never touched. I gave, and you called me mother only when my money was attached. And now you dare to call me confused because I finally said no? The lawyer slipped a folder from his briefcase, placing it on the table as though he were offering me a contract with the devil. A simple power of attorney, Mrs. Lang. Sign this, and your children can manage things more efficiently, just until you're feeling yourself again. I didn't even glance at it. I picked it up and flung it into the trash. The thud echoed like a gavel. This conversation is over, I said. Leave. Mara's eyes flashed with cold fury through her crocodile tears. You'll regret this, Greta. We have rights. We can go to court. Then go, I said, my voice calm now. an iciness settling over me. Go spend your money on lawyers, because mine is no longer yours. They gathered their things with wounded dignity, the gray-suited man stuffing his papers back into his briefcase. At the door, Owen turned once more, his voice low with anger. "Mom, this is going to end badly for you. You'll end up alone, with no one to take care of you." I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "I already am alone, Owen. The difference is now it's by choice." I closed the door behind them, and for the first time in years, the silence that followed was not oppressive. It was holy. The silence of the house clung to me after they left, heavy but not unwelcome. I leaned against the closed door, my breath shuddering in and out, and realized I wasn't trembling. For years, every confrontation with Owen or Mara had left me shaky, desperate to smooth things over, to keep the peace at any cost. Not this time. This time, the peace was mine. Still, I knew better than to trust silence. Wolves didn't retreat after one failed hunt. They circled back, hungrier. If they had brought a lawyer into my home once, they'd do it again. Maybe next time with papers I couldn't tear so easily. So I made a plan. The very next morning, I drove to Sutton's Hardware, a place I had visited countless times, but never for myself. Always for Owen, new tools, parts, repair kits for the apartment he and Mara couldn't maintain. The smell of sawdust and oil was oddly comforting. Behind the counter, Earl Sutton, tall and weathered with a carpenter's hands, looked up in surprise. "Mrs. Lang, need another part for Owen's place?" I shook my head. "No, Earl. This time it's for mine. I need new locks, good ones. The kind that won't give way to a spare key I shouldn't have handed out." He studied me a moment, then nodded. "Deadbolts and security plates. I'll have my boy Cal install 'em tomorrow morning if you like. He's good with cameras, too." "Cameras?" The word felt strange on my tongue. "Security system," Earl explained. "Doorbell view, motion sensors, everything linked to your phone. You'll know who's at your door before they ring." The idea made my chest loosen. "Do it," I said. "Price doesn't matter." When I got home, I stood in my kitchen and made a list, not of groceries or Owen's emergencies, but of my own future. Locks, cameras, a lawyer of my own. I wrote the name Avery Collins, elder law specialist, a number I'd gotten from a friend at church, and circled it twice. That afternoon, I did something radical. I kept an appointment for myself. I hadn't been to the salon in more than a year, always canceling at the last minute when Owen needed just a little more help. This time I walked in, asked for a trim and color, and let the stylist's hands work. When she spun me toward the mirror, a woman with brightened hair and eyes that no longer looked tired stared back. On the way home, I parked on a quiet street, rolled down the window, and breathed in the cold mountain air. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me, unknown number. I switched it off. For once, their emergencies weren't mine. As I turned the corner onto my street, I saw a figure sitting on the porch steps of the house next to mine. A woman with silver hair pulled into a bun and a thermos balanced on her knee. She stood as I parked and gave me a tentative smile. "Mrs. Lang?" "Yes?" "I'm Eudora Miles Dory. We've been neighbors for years, but we've never really talked. Yesterday I heard shouting at your place. I just wanted to make sure you're all right." Her sincerity startled me, a stranger showing more concern than my own blood. I hesitated, then nodded. "I'm fine, thank you. Would you like some coffee?" Her smile widened. "I brought some, but I'd take a seat if you're offering." We sat on my porch, steam rising from her thermos into the crisp air. For the first time, I told someone the truth. About the secret wedding, about the years of money, about the lawyer standing in my dining room. Dory listened without interrupting, her nurse's eyes kind but sharp. When I finished, she touched my arm. "Greta, what they're doing has a name. Elder financial abuse. I saw it too many times when I worked at the hospital. But you're fighting back early. That's good." Her words were like a hand steadying me on a steep staircase. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was naming what had been happening for years. That night, as I brushed my hair in front of the mirror, I caught sight of myself again. The lines in my face were still there, but behind them, something new gleamed steel. I whispered aloud, just to hear it in the room. No more. The next morning, when Cal Sutton arrived with boxes of locks and cameras, I greeted him not as a woman defeated, but as a general fortifying her castle. By noon, the front door had a deadbolt that clicked shut like a vault. The windows gleamed with reinforced latches, and a small camera above the porch blinked its silent red eye. Cal showed me how to link it to my phone, his hands quick and steady. "Now you'll see who's coming before they even set foot inside," he said, grinning like a boy proud of his handiwork. I thanked him, slipped a tip into his calloused palm, and when he left, I stood in the quiet house feeling taller than I had in years. My fortress was mine again. But a fortress without strategy is just a cage. I needed someone who could fight the battle legally, not just lock the doors. So I called Avery Collins, the attorney, whose number I'd circled. His secretary's voice was crisp. "Mrs. Lang, Mr. Collins can see you tomorrow at 10. Does that work?" It more than worked. For once, my schedule was not dictated by Owen's crises. "I'll be there," I said. That night, I cooked myself a real meal, rosemary chicken with roasted carrots, a recipe Robert and I used to love. I poured 1 glass of wine, not 2, and sat at the table. The cameras sent notifications to my phone each time a moth flitted across the porch light, and though it startled me at first, I smiled. Even the smallest intruder was noticed now. Halfway through dinner, the phone rang again, unknown number. I let it ring until the machine picked up. Mara's voice filled the kitchen, dripping with sugar but cracked at the edges. "Greta, please. It's Mara. The rent's overdue, and the landlord says if we don't pay this week, we'll be out on the street. You must have forgotten the transfer. Can you fix it tomorrow? Please?" I set down my fork. My heart thudded once, hard, then steadied. I walked to the machine, pressed the button to erase the message, and returned to my plate. Each bite tasted sharper, richer. For dessert, I ate a piece of dark chocolate I'd hidden from myself months ago, back when guilt made indulgence feel like betrayal. Now, it felt like defiance. The next morning, I dressed in my best Navy suit, the one I hadn't worn since Robert's funeral, and drove downtown. Collins and Howe occupied a brick building on Market Street with ivy climbing its facade. Inside, Avery Collins was younger than I expected, mid-40s, clean-shaven, with the kind of eyes that had seen more greed than kindness, but still burned with conviction. "Mrs. Lang," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "tell me everything." So I did. From the wedding I wasn't invited to the years of payments, to the lawyer in my dining room. I even slid my notepad across the desk with the numbers tallied in neat columns. $33,400. He whistled low. "That's not just generosity, Mrs. Lang. That's exploitation. What your son and daughter-in-law are doing is called elder financial abuse, and it's illegal." The words sent a jolt through me. I wasn't just a foolish mother. I was a victim of a crime. Avery leaned forward. "Here's what we'll do. First, we'll document everything: bank records, receipts, every transfer you've made. Second, we'll secure your assets, new accounts, new protections, a new will if you wish. And third," his gaze hardened, "if they escalate, we'll be ready with evidence. They won't be able to paint you as incompetent without a fight." I exhaled, long and shaky. "Do you think they'll try?" "Families like this." He nodded grimly. "They always try." I signed his retainer forms with a hand steadier than I expected. When I left his office, the city looked different, brighter, sharper. My armor was no longer just locks and cameras. It was law. That evening, as I pulled into my driveway, I spotted a figure waiting on the porch. For a moment, dread coiled in my stomach. But when I drew closer, I saw it was Dory, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "I thought you might need company," she said softly. We sat together under the blinking porch camera, steam curling from the mugs into the cold air. "I hired a lawyer today," I told her. "Good," she said, her nurse's voice steady. "Now you're fighting on all fronts." For the first time in years, I felt something rise in me that wasn't fear or exhaustion. It was resolve. The following days unfolded with an odd kind of calm, like the hush before a summer storm. I baked bread in the mornings, something I hadn't done in years, letting the smell fill the kitchen and erase the lingering memory of Mara's perfume. I tended to the roses Robert had planted out back, and each evening I sat on the porch with Dory, sipping coffee and watching the sun sink low over Savannah. But beneath the quiet, I could feel the tension building. I didn't have to wait long. On Thursday afternoon, just as I was folding laundry, the cameras pinged an alert. My phone lit up with the porch view. Owen's car, parked haphazardly at the curb. A second later, Mara's figure came into frame, her heels clicking up the walkway. Beside them stood another man in a gray suit, not the one from before. I stayed where I was, hidden behind the curtain, and let them knock, then pound, then call my name. "Mom," Owen's voice cracked through the door. "We just want to talk." Mara's sharper tones followed, carrying that mock concern she wielded like a blade. "Greta, you're shutting yourself away. This isn't healthy. We brought someone who can help you." I didn't move. I simply tapped Avery's number. When his assistant answered, I whispered, "They're here, with another lawyer." "Don't open the door," she instructed. "We'll send someone immediately. Document everything." So I did. I hit record on the camera feed and let it capture Mara's fist slamming against the wood, Owen pacing in the yard, the lawyer flipping through his briefcase as if preparing papers he'd never have the chance to serve. Finally, after nearly half an hour of unanswered knocking, their car doors slammed and the engine roared. I stayed by the window until the taillights disappeared. That evening, Avery called me himself. "Mrs. Lang, their visit strengthens your case. It's harassment. I'm filing for a temporary restraining order tomorrow morning." The words should have made me feel safe. Instead, they made me realize how far Owen and Mara were willing to go. And what frightened me most was not their persistence, but the knowledge that they still held a spare key. The locks were changed, yes, but in my mind, I could still see them barging in. 2 nights later, I dreamed of Robert. He was standing at the foot of our bed, just as he had the night before he passed, his hands folded, his eyes calm. "Greta," he said, "stop giving yourself away. You have nothing left to prove." I woke with tears on my pillow and a new fire in my chest. Robert had always been the steady one, the protector. Now it was my turn to protect what remained of our life. The following Sunday, I walked to church for the first time in months, heads turned as I entered. My hair was fresh, my back straight, and I wore the navy suit again, this time not as mourning, but as armor. After the service, Mrs. Coleman, a woman I'd known since Owen was in kindergarten, touched my arm. "Greta, you look radiant. What's your secret?" I smiled. I finally remembered I'm allowed to take care of myself. The words tasted strange, but they were true. And as I left the churchyard, I realized I no longer felt ashamed of the whispers I knew were spreading through town. Let them talk. Let them wonder why Owen and Mara hadn't been seen at my side in weeks. Truth has a way of shining through cracks. That evening, Dory stopped by with her daughter Elise, visiting from Atlanta. Elise was sharp-eyed, a lawyer herself, and as soon as she heard the story, she offered me her card. "If Avery needs a second opinion, call me," she said. "What they're trying to do isn't just cruel, it's criminal." For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt not just defended but surrounded, supported. I wasn't a lone woman fighting ghosts. I had allies, and they believed me. The calm didn't last. On Tuesday morning, a letter slid under my door. Thick, embossed, stamped with the seal of Chatham County Family Court. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. It was a summons. Owen and Mara had filed a petition to declare me mentally incompetent. The letter trembled in my hands as I read it again, the black ink blurring with my pulse. Petition for guardianship. The words screamed from the page. Owen's name as petitioner, Mara listed as witness. They weren't hiding anymore. They were declaring war. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I had written checks for their rent, their groceries, their whims. The same table where I had imagined wedding toasts and family dinners that never came. Now it was the battlefield where I would plan my defense. When Avery arrived later that morning, he scanned the summons with a calm face that belied the storm it carried. "We knew this was possible," he said, his voice steady. "Now we prepare. Hard evidence, credible witnesses, and professional evaluations. They've underestimated you, Mrs. Lang. That's their mistake." I swallowed hard. But what if the judge believes them? What if they take everything? He leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "They won't. We'll have Dr. Moore conduct a full psychiatric evaluation, cognitive tests, reasoning assessments, everything. We'll bring in neighbors, your financial records, proof of your independence. You're not alone in this fight." His words steadied me, but when he left, the silence of the house pressed in. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of Owen and Mara bursting through the door. I was afraid of the system, cold, faceless, and perhaps swayed by their lies. That evening, Dory came by with a casserole dish steaming in her hands. "You look like you haven't eaten," she said, setting it down on the counter. Elise trailed behind her, already pulling a legal pad from her purse. "We'll build character witnesses," Elise said briskly. "Dory, your testimony about what you've seen here is critical. Mrs. Lang, do you have others? Friends? Church members? Anyone who can attest to your clarity?" I thought of Mrs. Coleman from church, of Earl Sutton at the hardware store, of Cynthia at the salon. People who had seen me, spoken with me, witnessed my strength in these past weeks. I nodded slowly. "Yes, I have people." "Good," Elise said, scribbling notes. "We'll need them all." Dory put a hand on mine. "Greta, listen to me. You are not crazy. You are not confused. You are more alive now than I've ever seen you. Don't let them convince you otherwise." Her voice broke something loose inside me. For weeks, Owen and Mara's words had burrowed deep, confused, paranoid, unstable. But hearing Dory say the opposite with such conviction, I felt the truth settle in my bones. I wasn't broken. I was fighting. 2 days later, I sat in Dr. Moore's office, a quiet space filled with bookshelves and soft lamplight. She was a woman in her 50s, her eyes both kind and piercing. "Mrs. Lang," she said, "I'm going to ask you questions, give you tasks, see how your mind works. Take your time." For 2 hours I answered, solved, recalled, reasoned, math problems, word associations, memories from my childhood in Augusta, details about last week's news headlines. I felt my mind stretch and shine under her questions, every answer a small rebellion against Owen and Mara's lies. When she set down her pen, she gave me a smile that warmed me from the inside out. "Mrs. Lang, you are sharper than most 40-year-olds I've tested. I'll prepare a full report for the court. You have nothing to worry about." Her words were a balm, but I knew better than to believe the fight was over. Mara's tears, Owen's practiced indignation, they could sway anyone. I needed more than proof of competence. I needed strength. That night, as the cicadas sang outside, I stood at Robert's grave in Bonaventure Cemetery. I had brought fresh lilies, their scent sweet against the salt air. "I don't know if I can do this without you," I whispered, "but I know what you'd tell me. Stand tall, protect what's yours. Don't let them rewrite my story." The wind rustled through the oaks, moss swaying like old curtains. And in that sound, I almost heard his voice. "You're stronger than you think." I left the grave with my spine straighter, my hands steady. The storm was gathering, but I was ready to meet it head-on. The courthouse smelled faintly of lemon polish and old paper, a scent I remembered from renewing my driver's license years ago, though today it felt heavier, suffocating. The bailiff's voice echoed through the high-ceilinged chamber as he called our case. In re-guardianship of Greta Lang. My own name, spoken like I was a case file instead of a living woman. Owen sat at the petitioner's table, shoulders squared, wearing a suit too new to fit him comfortably. Mara beside him wore black, a silk scarf draped dramatically over her shoulders, as though this hearing were a funeral. Maybe it was for the illusion of family we once had. Their lawyer, a sleek man with silver hair, leaned toward them, whispering strategy. I sat with Avery, his briefcase open, neat files spread before him. Dory and Elise were in the gallery, their presence a silent wall of strength at my back. When I glanced their way, Dory gave me a small nod, lips pressed tight but eyes blazing. The judge, a stern man named Miller, adjusted his glasses and motioned for Owen's lawyer to begin. "Your Honor," the man said in a voice smooth as silk, "this is a tragic case of an elderly woman's decline. Mrs. Lang, once a devoted mother, has recently exhibited paranoia, financial irresponsibility, and irrational behavior. She cut off vital support to her son and his wife without reason, installed unnecessary surveillance systems, and isolated herself from family under the influence of strangers. We are here today not to punish her, but to protect her. Protect me." The word made bile rise in my throat. Owen took the stand first. He folded his hands, lowered his gaze like a grieving child. "My mom, she's not the same," he said softly. "She forgets things, gets confused. She doesn't trust us anymore. We're scared she'll lose everything she worked for." Avery leaned close to me and whispered, "Notice he hasn't given one specific example. Watch how quickly he unravels when pressed." Then came Mara. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her voice trembling in rehearsed sorrow. "Greta was like a second mother to me, but lately she's shut us out. She screams, she refuses help, she hides behind cameras and locks. We just want her safe. We love her." I gripped the edge of the table. Love. How easily she twisted that word into a dagger. When Avery cross-examined them, his tone was calm but relentless. "Mr. Lang," he said, "is it true your mother paid your rent for 3 years?" "Yes, but—" "And furnished your apartment?" "Yes." "And covered medical bills, car repairs, even personal expenses?" Owen shifted uncomfortably. "She wanted to." "Tell me, sir, when was the last time you visited your mother without asking for money?" Owen's mouth opened, then closed. The silence stretched until Judge Miller cleared his throat. "And you, Mrs. Langford?" Avery turned to Mara. "Did you not once tell my client she was not special enough to attend your wedding?" Mara flushed. Those words were taken out of context. What possible context makes that acceptable to say to the woman financing your life? Her eyes flicked toward the judge, but she had no answer. Then it was my turn. My legs trembled as I walked to the witness stand, but when I raised my hand to swear the oath, a strange calm settled over me. Avery's questions were gentle, deliberate. He let me tell my story, not just the money, not just the humiliation, but the years of giving, the quiet sacrifices, the empty seat at the wedding. "Why did you stop supporting them, Mrs. Lang?" Avery asked finally. I lifted my chin. Because I realized what they were giving me back wasn't love. It was a transaction. My money was welcome, but I was not. I stopped because I finally understood my worth. My voice didn't shake. Not once. When their lawyer tried to rattle me on cross-examination, asking the year of Robert's death, the amount of my retirement, even the name of the current mayor, I answered each question clearly, precisely. With every response, I saw Judge Miller's pen scratch steadily across his notepad. At the end of testimony, Avery called his last witness, Dr. Moore. She presented her report, every page stamped with authority. Mrs. Lang is in excellent cognitive health, she said firmly. Her reasoning, memory, and executive function exceed the norm for her age. There is no medical basis for guardianship. It was the nail in the coffin of their case. Still, as the judge recessed for deliberation, my stomach knotted. Truth was on my side, but courts are unpredictable. I folded my hands in my lap, whispering a silent prayer to Robert. To anyone listening, don't let them take my life away. The minutes of deliberation stretched like hours. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the scrape of shoes against tile, the shuffle of papers. I sat rigid, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached. Dory's steady gaze anchored me. Elise gave a small nod from the gallery, reminding me I wasn't alone. Finally, Judge Miller re-entered. He settled behind the bench, removed his glasses, and looked straight at me. "This court has reviewed the evidence," he began, his tone grave. "We have heard testimony from the petitioners, from witnesses, and from the respondent herself. We have reviewed psychiatric evaluations and financial records. The petitioners allege paranoia, incompetence, and financial mismanagement." He paused, letting the silence settle heavy as stone. "But the evidence presented does not support these claims." A breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaped me in a rush. The judge continued, his voice steady but firm. "On the contrary, the respondent, Mrs. Greta Lang, has demonstrated clear reasoning, financial responsibility, and excellent mental capacity. The testimony from Dr. Moore, corroborated by community witnesses, confirms her competence. The petitioner's case appears motivated not by concern, but by financial interest." Mara stiffened, her face paling. Owen shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. Judge Miller's gavel struck once. The petition for guardianship is denied in full. Furthermore, due to repeated harassment and intrusion, this court strongly recommends the respondent pursue a protective order. "Mrs. Lang, you are free to manage your own affairs." Case dismissed. The final crack of the gavel echoed like thunder. Relief washed over me, so intense I nearly wept. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight felt different, brighter, warmer, as though the sky itself recognized my freedom. Reporters weren't waiting, but the murmurs from those who had witnessed the case carried like wildfire. The mother who stood up to her own son. The woman who fought back. Owen stormed past me, his face red, avoiding my eyes. Mara lingered just long enough to spit venom through clenched teeth. "This isn't over, Greta. You'll regret humiliating us." I met her gaze with a calm I hadn't known I possessed. "The only thing I regret is mistaking you for family." Her expression cracked, and she turned sharply, heels striking like gunshots on the marble floor. That evening, back home, the kitchen smelled of lavender polish and fresh bread. Dory brought champagne, Elise carried a cake, and a handful of neighbors came too. Cynthia from the salon, Earl from the hardware store, even Mrs. Coleman from church. My house, once a place of solitude and whispers, rang with laughter and voices. "To freedom," Dory toasted, lifting her glass. "To dignity," Elise added. I raised mine last, my hand steady, my heart full. To learning, even late in life, that love cannot be bought, and to never confusing silence with peace again. The glasses clinked, and the sound was sweeter than any music I'd ever heard. Later, when the guests had gone and the house had grown quiet, I sat alone on the porch, staring at the dark sweep of the Savannah River. I thought of Robert, of the little boy Owen had once been, of the illusions I had carried for too many years. The grief was still there, but it was softer now, less sharp. In its place rose something sturdier, more enduring. Freedom. For the first time in decades, the future was mine to shape. The weeks that followed felt like a second spring, even though the calendar said autumn. I woke each morning without dread, without the heavy obligation to check bank balances or answer pleading calls. Instead, I opened the curtains wide, brewed coffee just for myself, and watched sunlight spill across the kitchen tiles. The phone still rang unknown numbers, Owen's name flashing occasionally, but I no longer jumped at the sound. I let the machine take them, the silence afterward sweeter than any apology he could invent. Mara didn't call at all. Perhaps her pride wouldn't allow it, or perhaps she was too busy finding another host to feed from. Avery helped me file the protective order Judge Miller had suggested. The paperwork was long, but each signature I scrawled was another lock on a door they would never again cross. One morning, a delivery van stopped outside. For a second, I thought it might be another trick, another envelope of threats. But when I opened the package, I found a new easel, paints, and brushes sent by Dory and Elise. A note was tucked inside, for the woman who finally has time for her own colors. I cried then, but they were not the hot tears of betrayal. They were cool, cleansing, a release. I set up the easel by the window and began painting again bright sunflowers, storm-dark skies, even the outline of the river that had become my evening companion. With each stroke, I felt myself return piece by piece. One afternoon, Eleanor from next door invited me to join her garden club. At first, I hesitated. For years, I had declined invitations, always chained to Owen and Mara's needs. But this time I said yes. The women welcomed me like an old friend. We traded stories, laughter, recipes. Some shared their own heartbreaks, children who only called when money was tight, relatives who treated them as burdens rather than blessings. I realized I wasn't alone. My pain wasn't unique. And in that realization came strength. As winter gave way to spring, I planned something daring. A trip to Italy, a place Robert and I had once dreamed of visiting but never could. I booked the tickets myself, clicking confirm with a trembling hand that steadied as the confirmation email appeared. I imagined walking through Florence, tasting gelato, standing beneath the Sistine Chapel ceiling, not with guilt, not with shame, but with joy. For the first time in years, my money was a bridge to my dreams, not a leash around my neck. On a quiet evening, sitting on the porch as the last light faded, I thought of Owen, my son. The boy who once clung to my skirt when thunder frightened him, who whispered that I was the best mom in the world. I grieved that boy, because the man he became had no place in my life. Maybe one day he would learn, maybe not. But I no longer lived on that hope. The only certainty I needed was the one blooming inside me. I was whole. I was free. I turned to the darkening river and whispered, "Robert, I did it. I finally chose myself." The wind carried the words away, but in my chest they settled firm as stone. Script completed.